From that time on, Jesus began to explain to his disciples that he must go to Jerusalem and suffer many things at the hands of the elders, the chief priests, and the teachers of the law, and that he must be killed and on the third day be raised to life. Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him. "Never, Lord," he said, "this shall never happen to you." Jesus turned and said to Peter, "Get behind me, Satan. You are a stumbling block to me. You do not have in mind the concerns of God, but merely human concerns." Then Jesus said to his disciple, "Whoever wants to be my disciple must deny himself and take up their own cross and follow me. For whoever wants to save their life will lose it, but whoever loses their life for me will find it. What good will it be for someone to gain the whole world, yet forfeit their soul? Or what can anyone give in exchange for their soul? For the Son of Man is going to come to his Father's glory with the angels, and then he will reward each person according to what they have done. Truly, I tell you, who are standing here will not taste death before they see the Son of Man coming into his kingdom." So what we have here is a very private, intimate conversation between students, their teachers, and friends. We really do. It's almost as though, sometimes when you're out in public and two people are having an argument and you overhear it and you think, "Oh my gosh, I should not be witnessing this." Because that's what we have. Jesus is keenly aware that what he is saying, what he is doing, and how he is doing it is getting him in trouble. The religious and the civil authorities are feeling threatened by him and his movement. And Jesus knows that when the time is right, they are going to strike. Jerusalem is the political center. And as he and his disciples are making their way toward Jerusalem, he knows that that is when they will feel safest to strike out against Jesus. He knows this. And so he's being very honest with his disciples and telling them, soon, when we're in Jerusalem, the powers that be are going to seize me, they're going to kill me, and then I'm going to be raised to life on the third day. Now, looked at this passage and I read it in Greek. I know that I'm doing that a lot lately. But language is an interesting thing. For example, log on today means something very different than what it did, even 30 years ago, right? To log on 30 years ago, you might be thinking about putting something on a fire. Now you're talking about a computer, right? So, looking at language is very important. So let's look at the word raised to life. I thought that was a very interesting phrase, raised to life. The Greek word is egeiro. It means to arouse, cause to rise, to arouse from sleep, to awake, to arouse from the sleep of death, to recall the dead to life, to cause to rise from the seat or a bed, or even like to raise up a building, or to raise up a project. Jesus says he will be killed and be raised back to life. Now, when his disciples heard this, they didn't like the news. No one would want to hear this news. This would be the same as if someone that you love dearly went to the doctor to get the test results, and they came back and said, "It doesn't look good, it's terminal," right? It would be that same devastating news. And it appears that as Jesus is telling his disciples this, they were very quiet, except for one, who's Peter, who, as we know, is very impulsive. And not only does Peter react, but Peter reacts very strongly. And the language in the Greek here is like very, very strong. It says rebuke, but the whole scenario here is not just, oh no, you won't. It was like in your face, wagging your finger, you cannot, you will not do this, all right? So Peter is really demanding that Jesus does not do this. So in the Greek, what is used here for emphasis is using a double negative. Any grammar Nazis in the house? You know, you're not supposed to use, okay, Denise, yeah, okay. You're not supposed to use two negatives back to back. No, not, okay. In the Greek, they use double negatives here to help bring about the emphasis. So the translation that we have in our Bible is this: "Never, Lord," he said, "this shall never happen to you." All right? Now, if we were to read it exactly like it's written in the Greek, it is, Peter commands, no, not ever, to exist, to happen to you. All right, let me read it for you again, because it sounds a little weird. Go back. No, not ever, to exist, to happen to you. That's the literal translation from the Greek. Now, you know that law of physics? That for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction? Have you ever stopped and wondered why Jesus reacts so strongly back? I mean, think about it, right? This wasn't an issue where Jesus says, well, Peter, I disagree with you. Peter, well, you have your opinion, I have mine. Peter, we'll have to agree to disagree with this. No, Jesus comes back just as strong, right? Peter's in his face, wagging his finger, oh, no, you don't. And Jesus comes back, oh, no, you didn't, all right? And he says, get behind me, Satan. Jesus calls him Satan, all right? That's kind of, Jesus is calling Peter at this moment in time, you are an adversary of God. You're an adversary of God. And right now, you have no clue of the mind of God. Right now, you can only concern yourself with the concerns of human beings. You don't see the big picture, Peter. You can only think about right now are human beings. So you need to get behind me. Now, the phrase get behind me, it means literally to lead under, bring under, withdraw oneself, go away. To back behind afterwards. So Jesus is saying to Peter, you're an adversary of God right now, and you need to go away. And right now, your mind is little. You have no clue what you're saying here. And you have become a stumbling block to me. Now, the word stumbling in the Greek is scandalon, which in English we have the word what? What does scandalon sound like? Scandal. Oh, okay. Here's the translation of the Greek word scandalon. The movable stick or trigger of a trap. You know what I'm talking about? You have a trap and you stick a stick, and when the animal comes along, takes the bait, the stick comes out and the trap falls. Jesus felt like Peter was setting him up for a what? Trap. And Peter was the movable stick. Why did Jesus react like he did? Because he felt like Peter was pushing him up against the wall. This is a case in point where Peter crossed the boundary. This is a case in point where mama and daddy tells child, you need to go do this, and child tells mama and daddy, you need to shut up and stop telling me what to do. Oh, no, you didn't. Right? A boundary was crossed. When Jesus talks to him about what your mind is, Jesus is saying to him, you're thinking way, way, way too high of yourself right now. You're thinking way too high of yourself. You need to step back. All right, so let me ask you this. Have you ever stopped to wonder why Jesus reacted so strongly? I mean, think about it. Was Peter a real threat to Jesus in some way? If he wasn't a threat at all, why would Jesus need to come back so hard? My belief is that Peter was tempting Jesus to change his mind. Jesus knew what he was doing. Jesus knew who he was. Jesus knew what he had to achieve, and Jesus knew what the consequences were for doing it. And in that moment of time, I believe Peter got to him and was tempting him not to follow through. And Jesus had to strike back hard because he felt he was in a trap. You see? So what happens in this passage is Jesus shows us something very, very powerful. He shows us something at a crossroads of life. Jesus is showing us that the most important thing in life is to know who we are, to know what we are to do, and to fulfill our destiny completely. That's the most important thing. Other things are important too, but the most important thing is to know who we are, what we're to do, and to fulfill it as completely as possible. Jesus knew in that moment in time that if he had listened to Peter and Jesus had not fulfilled what he was to do, there would be severe consequences. And for Jesus, being turned over to the authorities, being killed, was worse than not fulfilling his destiny. All right, now, throughout history, and those people inspire us in history, they've all come to these crossroads. You and I have come to these crossroads. Now, they may not be as severe as this, and history may not hinge upon it, but we all have that crossroad in our lives, do we not? That moment in time when we feel in our gut and in our spirit, this is what I need to do, and yet we're being tempted to do otherwise, right? One of my favorite movies is Lincoln. Remember that movie that came out a while back? I've probably seen it more than 5 times, and I swear to you, I sweated out how the vote's going to turn out every time on the abolition of slavery. Every time I sweated out, just sitting there, pins and needles, hoping they're going to get enough, right? But think about Abraham Lincoln. He knew what his purpose as the president. Here you have the crossroads of history. The United States, as being a united country, is in peril. And now there's rumors that the Confederacy is ready to make terms for surrender, and the rumor's getting now to Washington. And Lincoln's doing all he can to hide those officials from the Confederacy and keep them out of the way, because he's going to pass this amendment. There can no longer be slavery in the United States. There can no longer be slavery in the United States. And you have that powerful scene where he's at the table and all of his cabinet members and everybody are standing around and they're all debating, it's not the right time. You mean to tell me that the Confederates are about to surrender? And how in the world I feel betrayed? And all this arguing, Mr. President, this is not, postpone this, hold back, this is not the right time to do this. And all the yelling and the screaming and all that. And then this quiet, gentle giant slams his hand on the table and he says, I am the President of the United States, and with this comes an enormous amount of power. And this is going to pass now. And you have to make it happen. Think what would have happened in this country if he had compromised. Right? And think about all the heroic people that you look up to. And you read their stories, there's always that moment in time when they were being asked to what? Compromise. Whether it's in history or in fiction, the hero and the heroine, you look at their story and you see how they confront all the voices and all the stumbling blocks, wanting them to what? Compromise. But we love them because they prevail and fulfill their destiny. Am I right? A new movie is out now, Hacksaw Ridge. If you're grossed out by graphic violence, not one to watch, but it's a true story about a man who wanted to be involved in World War II, but did not want to carry a weapon to shoot people. He was going in as a medic, and he wanted to do nothing but save lives. And they tried to beat him up to get him out. They shamed him. They did everything they could. And he ended up being one of the most decorated and revered heroes of the Pacific Theater. He would not compromise his vision, you see. Oh, we love that. Not all of us come to that crossroad. But all of us come to a crossroad in our lives. So Jesus now takes this moment to use it as a teaching experience. He says to him, for whoever wants to save their life will lose it. Whoever wants to lose their life for my sake will find it. What good will it be for someone to gain the whole world and forfeit their soul? Or what can anyone give in exchange for their soul? Once again, word study. Want. Anyone who wants to save their life. To will, have in mind, intend, to be resolved, or determined to purpose. It's like the things in life, the harder you want to hold on to something, the greater the chance you'll what? Lose it. What Jesus is teaching us in this is that there's more to our lives than what's in this world. It's hard for us as human creatures who live on this planet to fathom that. There's more to us than what is carbon life form. It's hard for us to sometimes to conceive and to become fully aware that we are eternal beings in temporary structures. And we get so caught up that we're always wanting to save our lives, and in order to save our lives we have to put walls and prisons around ourselves, and we have to hoard, and we have to live in fear, right? And the more we try to hang on, the more we lose. But one of the things I found so fascinating as I was reading this in the Greek, you have the word life and the word soul. And it uses the same Greek word in both cases. I read it 3 or 4 times just to make sure. The Greek word is phuske. Phuske. This is what it means. Life, soul. Life, /soul. Breath, the breath of life, the vital force which animates the body and shows itself in breathing. In animals and people, life, that which there is life, a living being, a living soul, the soul. the seat of the feelings, desires, affections, aversions, the heart, the soul, the human soul, insofar as it is constituted by the right use of the aids offered it by God, it can attain its highest end and secure eternal blessedness. The soul, regarded as a moral being designed for everlasting life. The soul as an essence which differs from the body and is not dissolved by death. It's a powerful word, isn't it? You see, you just read that in English. Oh, one who loses their life for my sake will find it. What is it to gain the world and lose your soul, forfeit you? The reason why I give you these word stories is so you can see it in the context, so that you can get the richness. To lose. It's not like, oh, I lost my car keys. Oh, I lost that bet. No. This is what good is it to lose? If you try to save your life, you lose it. The word lose means to destroy, to put out of the way entirely, to abolish, to put an end to ruin, to render useless, to kill. That's how powerful that word is. For those of you who try to save your life, you will lose it. Do you see how powerful this teaching is? And then he says, but those of you who are willing to lose your life for my sake, you will find your fuske. Find, to come upon. To meet with, after searching. To find, through examination, through scrutiny. To find out by practice and by observation. You see? We just want a magic pill, the red or the blue one, right? Any Matrix fans? I saw 2 smiles. All right, bad illustration. We just want it to poof. No. If you're going to find your real self, your real life, you have to work at it. You have to be willing to discipline yourself to let go of all the stuff that grabs after you, to discover who you truly are and who you really are, to discover how precious and how wonderful you are as a creation of God. So we have to ask ourselves, well, I don't know, you don't have to, but I highly recommend we do. I'm not the boss of you. I highly recommend we ask ourselves, what are the stumbling blocks in our lives? What's the scandalon? What's the traps that are set for us and that we set for ourselves? Are the stumbling blocks the cosmos, the world? Yeah, there's a lot of them out there. It is and can be a scary world, can't it? All you have to do is just listen to 30 minutes of news. I can't listen to Channel 13. I watch it for the weather. But within 5 minutes, I hear about 6 rapes and 5 murders. It's amazing. Same with national news. I don't hear anything about you all. They had nothing on the news about Jane Chancey being a new grandmother and how excited she was about it. David Snow getting engaged in front of Hamilton, the theater for Hamilton. Nothing at all on that. Not a thing. But I know that there's a lot of life. You see, there's a lot going on in this world to be stumbling blocks for us. We feel like we need to build great storage houses for all of our treasures, so that when we die, we'll have lots of stuff. Sure. Family and friends. There are no greater influences on our lives than family and friends, am I right? They can be the greatest stumbling blocks for us. And it's not because they're mean and they don't love us, but what others think is best for us may be the opposite of what we need to do. Peter loved Jesus, right? Peter did what he did to Jesus because he loved Jesus so much. Oh, no, you won't do that, Peter said. It's not because people don't love us, but they can become the biggest stumbling blocks for us. But this is the biggest scandalon that I've discovered for myself, and as I've done counseling over all these years. Do you know what the greatest scandalon is? More so than the world? More so than family? Everybody, why is everybody pointing at yourself? Oh, it's just a time for confession. I thought you'd be pointing at each other. Yeah. Imagination is a wonderful thing as long as you do not use it against yourself. I cannot tell you how much pain and suffering people cause themselves because of their perceptions of reality. We react emotionally and physically because of our perceptions of how things are without ever taking the time to check to see if our perceptions are true. Right? 90% of the time, they aren't true. How many of us have not done things we had great desire within our soul to do because we didn't think we could do it? Right? How many of us don't do things because someone 30 years ago said we couldn't accomplish anything, and we still let those voices prevail in our heads? They're no longer staying around us saying, oh, no, you can't. But it's no longer their voice, it's what? Our voice. Don't you see how pivotal this passage is? Jesus would rather be arrested, beaten, scourged, and crucified than compromise on his purpose. That's how important it is. Some of you may be asking, well, what is my purpose? What do you spend most of your time thinking about? If you say pizza, I'm going to slap you. What do you spend most of your time thinking about? In your quiet moments before you go to sleep at night, what are you thinking about? See, God's calling somebody right now saying, I've been trying to tell you what your purpose is. When you're driving in your car and there's nothing on the radio or anything and it's quiet, what are you thinking about? When you're going to your job and you hate what you do and you wish you could be doing something else, what are you thinking about? Chances are, that's what you need to be investing yourself in. And when we talk about that, it's not so much that our vocation is always our purpose. Some of us will be doing jobs to meet the needs of our family and be responsible citizens and all that, but we then do something else. Do you realize that seminary students now, as they're entering into seminary, are told the chances of you graduating from seminary and getting a full-time ministry is almost zero? You will have to work a regular job and then do ministry on the side, because so many churches can no longer afford a full-time ministry. It blew me away. But if that's what you're called to do, you will find a way to make it work. Right, Marcelino? Yeah. Jesus shows us in this passage that knowing who you are and being your utmost self is the most important thing in the world. And even when your best friend tells you no, you have to shove them aside. Because your eternal self, your ouske, your life, your soul, must fulfill what God created you to fulfill completely. For I think the tragic thing in life and the ultimate sin is to go through your whole life not knowing who you are and what you're to do. so. Find it. Whatever it takes, find it. If you found it, then how may you enhance it? How might it change and evolve? God will not leave you in mystery if you really want to know. Do it. It's the most important crossroad of your life. Thus ends the lesson. Let us pray. God, help us to see that this whole reality of life and soul is never to be taken lightly. I don't even know that really it's an option. I mean, I suppose that we can choose or not choose. But the consequences are great either way. I pray for all of us here that there will never be a trap strong enough to keep us from being the people you created us to be. And as Steve wrote so beautifully, 100 people who have found themselves are unstoppable. And what we can do in this world is so powerful. Thank you, God, for this church, for this community of faith, and for these disciples whom I know are working so hard to be the children and the mature souls you created them to be. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. This time I want to ask Vicki to come.